400 plus person architecture engineering firm. And I was like, okay, if I do everything right, I could be that guy in 10, 15, 20 years. And I didn't really like what I saw. So he complained about, not having time to work out, didn't have time with his family, was worried about paying for college for his kids and things. And I didn't really get the feeling that like, that's what I wanted.
Everyone has a sock drawer where we hide the stuff we don't want to face. Today, we're opening yours. I'm Lisa Begley, and this is the Sock Drawer Podcast. If your life feels messy, stuck, or outgrown, good. That's where we begin. Hey there, Sock Drawer family. What if the life you built, the one that made sense, the one that looked successful, was never actually yours to begin with? Because today's guest followed the plan, built the career, made the money, and still found himself asking a question most people are afraid to say out loud. Is it me, or is this just not it? Everyone, welcome back to the Sock Drawer Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Project Icon, helping leaders and founders share their story, build their brand, and find their voice. I'm joined today by Ryan Sullivan, founder of Off the Beaten Path Financial. Ryan started his career as a mechanical engineer, designing systems across the country and building an engineering department that scaled to over $1 million in revenue. But behind that success was a quiet realization. He didn't want that life forever. But what followed was not a quick pivot. It was years of searching, questioning, learning, and then ultimately building a life aligned with how he actually wanted to live. Ryan, thank you for being here and welcome to the Sock Drawer Podcast, Pam.
Thanks, Lisa. Excited to be here.
Great. So let's start from the beginning, like we talked about a little bit before we jumped on, because on paper, everything worked, right? And if I have any of this a little off, let me know. But you built a successful engineering career, scaled a department, hit real milestones early on. So looking back, what did that season of life kind of look like for you at that point?
Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain extent, it kind of started before then. And so in my first job out of school, engineering school, I started off working as a mechanical engineer and pretty quickly realized that I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that forever. And so I saw kind of the career path of, my boss, his boss, who I sat right next to, worked with every day, was the head of all the mechanical engineers for the whole company. And this was a 400 plus person architecture engineering firm. And I was like, okay, if I do everything right, I could be that guy in 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. And I didn't really like what I saw. So he complained about, not having time to work out, didn't have time with his family, was worried about paying for college for his kids and things. And I didn't really get the feeling that like, that's what I wanted. And so that was, I was probably 23 at the time, kind of having this realization. And from that point forward, it was, okay, what am I going to do then? And when I took the opportunity to start the engineering department, prior to that, I was actually considering leaving the industry, doing something different. But it was kind of a unique opportunity where I basically got to build my own engineering firm inside of an existing business. And so I had realized that, initially I thought investing and potentially trading was going to be the way for me to make money and grow money. Mm-hmm. But that typically you need some money to make some money. And so I found entrepreneurship, business ownership as one of the better ways to have more control of your income and ultimately have more freedom. And so this was a multi-year sort of journey and progression of sorting through that. When the engineering department opportunity came up, it was like, okay, well, at least I get to kind of dive into the business side of things. I can figure this out. At the time, I was 26. And so it was a great opportunity to kind of get my feet wet, learn more about business, the other side of not just being an engineer. But ultimately that proved not to be good enough either. So
yeah, well, so that's a lot. And you're fortunate, maybe not. I'll see what you think about this, but fortunate to recognize that early on. So many of us don't. So that was a good thing. But you've been known to say, I don't want to do this forever. When you take me back to kind of into that moment, right? Was it a gradual thing? Did it hit you all at once? Was it right away, or were there things kind of like leading up to you going, other than just looking left, looking right, seeing where they're at? Was there anything else that led you up to that moment?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of seeing what, engineers ahead of me, their life and kind of career look like, that was the thing that gave me pause. But
Yeah.
really, probably the best sort of story, right? This was a big catalyst for me. Was I was on a site visit, so I was with two senior engineers. We were, I'm in Montana. We were driving down to Wyoming to go look at this building, and for whatever reason, it was just dead silent the entire drive. So there was no music, there was no talking, there was no nothing. And at the time, I was reading the book Think and Grow Rich, and I, for whatever reason, had this sort of epiphany. And so I'm sitting in the back seat, and I'm starting to like cry and get really emotional, and I'm like trying to hold it back, so the guys in front don't realize that I'm just sobbing in the back. And what I realized, or what kind of hit me, was, I mean, the title of the book sort of says it all, think and grow rich. And at a certain point, like, it's that simple. Like, what do you want? Okay. How do you get it? And that was a big catalyst for me of realizing I could have anything. Like, there's nothing really that much different between me and, people that are very, very successful, other
Yeah.
than just putting in the work and going after it. And so that started off, okay, I don't know what that is, but I know that I can do it or I'll figure it out. And
Yeah.
so then it was like, all right, what do I need to do? And that brought down just a lot of personal development and growth that put me in a position where someone would actually hire me at 26 to run an engineering department.
Yeah. Well, so now did anything, it doesn't sound like this, but did anything kind of scare you in that moment? Or was there something kind of like admitting that to yourself and realizing that? Was it nerve wracking, or was it like, I got this, I'm out?
I would say mostly it was probably empowering. And I'm not a lot of things, I guess, make me scared or fearful. And so I've always had a fair bit of just confidence in my own abilities and what I can do. And so
Yeah.
that, I think, just made more apparent that it's up to me. And so I'm either going to make it happen or not. And if I want something, then I got to put in the work. Like, no one's going to just show up and give me this amazing life. And
Yeah.
so that was all I needed, was just kind of that affirmation, or knowing that that's just how the world works. And okay, now I'm going to figure it out.
I love that you said, I've always had the ability, the confidence and the like fearlessness to jump. Tell me, would you ever think about where that comes from? Is that like, was that from top down, like parents or family, or was it a specific thing? Like where, because I have that same thing. And it's interesting to me. People go, I can't believe you just jump and you do this and that. And so I'm curious if you have a thought about where that comes from.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if I do. I mean, I know that at least what I recall is getting a fair bit of positive feedback as a kid of like, oh, you're smart, and things like that. And so I felt like I was smart, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember, telling myself as I was thinking about starting a business or doing different things, like, I've never drowned. Like, if you throw me in the pool, like, I'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't really know exactly where that came from, but I do know that one sort of parallel was I really enjoy skiing, and that's a big part of what I like to do. And in college, I started skiing more gnarly terrain, I guess, or more difficult things, and I started just pushing myself and using safer environments to practice to a certain extent, or work through some of the fear, the resistance, so that when I was actually in more consequential terrain, I was more comfortable there. And so
Gotcha.
that sort of approach I've applied to life and other things. And it's just being willing to kind of take those risks or push yourself, even though it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly where that comes from, but it's kind of been there throughout and been a big factor in ultimately my success.
So good. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, take me back a little bit because you didn't immediately jump right into clarity. So you explored, and there's a lot of people who are in this position, right? They're not sure. They think they know where they want to go. They're not necessarily sure how to get there, but you explored, you questioned, you tried things. What did that season actually look like for somebody in that season as well? What would you say?
Yeah, well, it ended up being probably close to a 10-year journey, which is
Okay.
kind of crazy in
Yeah.
hindsight. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think I was about 23 when I sort of had this realization, and then it was okay. Now what? And
Mm.
so I I thought about trading, stocks and investments and things, but was like, that's dumb. I don't have any money. I'm 23, and most people aren't successful with that long term. So I
Yeah.
need to figure out a better way. And it's tough when you don't have a lot of money to start. So that led me to entrepreneurship and business. I was like, okay, I'm going to start a business. I have no idea what to start. I don't know what to do, but I really like the idea of business stuff, whatever that means. So I was like, I'm going to be a business consultant. And what does a consultant sell? They sell their experience, and you have none because you're like 25 and you haven't done anything yet. And I
At
was
least he
like,
was honest, right?
yeah. So he's like, no one's going to hire you. And I was like, okay, like that's fair. I get that, I
Right.
guess. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just buy a business. And like, I still don't have that much money. I'm 25. And right around the time that I met my now wife, I was actually looking at buying a lumber mill for like, I don't know, $3 or $4 million or something. And
Okay.
like, she was like, this is crazy. Like, who is this guy? And um, that didn't work out. That probably was not a good idea for various reasons. And so I just had this drive to figure it out.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's when the engineering department opportunity came up. And I was like, okay, well, this kind of makes sense. Like, I just spent 5 years getting licensed as an engineer. I have that experience. At least maybe I can get ownership in this or something, and I'll figure it out. And so I started that. That went, fairly well. That company got purchased by a larger mechanical plumbing contractor, and so the culture, the environment, things changed a little bit. I still kept growing that, but I just kept coming back to I want to have more control. I want to have more freedom. I want to have more flexibility, and I'm not going to get that working here or really probably for any company. So I need
Yeah.
to do my own thing, and so this was in 2020. So like kind of during COVID, I ran into this guy at the store, and he was a financial advisor that used to be an engineer. And we really hit it off. Like we started talking, and originally I wanted him to manage my investments. And so went to his office, met with him. He looked at my portfolio and he was like, I've never seen anyone with this level of sophistication in their portfolio that's like looking to have me help them. He's like, you should just keep doing your thing. And so I think coming from that same place of originally an engineer, moved into finance. So we started meeting up for lunch or drinks, once a month, every other month. And originally had no desire or interest to become a financial advisor. But eventually, like about 2 years later, I started trading options for a while. So I finally like got into trading, made a bunch of money, lost all of it back, and was like, I want to do something in the finance space, the investment space. How can I do that? And through a few catalysts, ultimately realized, well, I think being a financial advisor would make a lot of sense. Like, I love having one-on-one conversations. I like helping people. I can do that from anywhere. I'm good at managing money and investments. And I was already like talking to people about stuff like that kind of on the side. So all of that sort of came together. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I think from the day that I decided was the day I set up my LLC, the day I started the registration process, the day I started studying for the exam. And a couple months, took me like 3 months or so, I think, to go through that whole process. Firm's up and running. And my plan was to build that on the side while I still had the job. And back to the fear and stuff, this was definitely one of the biggest things that I was worried about. And so I spent at this time, I don't know, what was that, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, working as an engineer in a pretty good job, making good money. Like, I was doing my thing, and I'm going to give all that up and just throw it away to like go do this new business that I don't know anything about. And so it took me about 2 years before I finally, well, part of it was they wouldn't let me work remote. So we bought this property, and so we live in the middle of nowhere. They wouldn't let me work remote like I wanted. So I basically was like, all right, I'll give up my job. Like, I'm not driving an hour and a half one way every day to go to the office.
Yeah.
And so then this guy got hired who became my boss, like after I sort of talked to the owner about it. And then I kind of got pushed out. So like the whole thing got expedited, and it was this very scary process.
Yeah.
It was like a very stressful time of, yeah. And then,
I
so,
bet. I bet.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I mean, it sounds like it all sort of happened the way it was supposed to. I'm sure looking back now, you probably feel like that, but maybe in the moment, yes, it's scary, especially for someone like you who's a high level of responsibility, high level of accountability, making sure everything's lined up. So, when you started this and you're helping others now, right? What were you seeing that maybe others weren't as you started helping other people?
Yeah. Well, it, part of the reason why I wanted to do this in particular was because I felt like it did use the strengths and the experience that I had accumulated over the years. And so a lot of what people are sort of missing, I've found, is lack of a real clear vision. And that's something that has always really helped me, and that I established early on of I knew what I wanted. And so most people kind of know, and they kind of talk about it, or they think they know, but they don't really know.
Yeah.
And if you don't know where you're going, it's pretty tough to get there.
Yeah.
And so,
True.
so that's been a big thing of, helping people clarify that.
Yeah.
And then, I've sort of developed some unique strategies about how I think about money, how to manage that, how to manage investments. And most people just don't have the time, the energy, the desire, the capacity to really think that much about these things. And whether you like it or not, in this day and age, like, money is sort of the root of your life. Like, it's the tool that you use to be able to do whatever. And so if you're not careful, like, an interesting thing I've noticed is the people that are usually in the worst financial situation are the ones that think about it the least. And that might feel obvious, but people choose not to worry about it or think about it, and therefore it doesn't grow, and they struggle. And so if you don't want to do it, that's fine. There's people out there, like me, that are willing to help you with that. But that's kind of the step that people need to make. Is it is important because it's the tool that allows you to unlock everything else.
So true. And you have to really, people have to realize they need help. And so many people don't. I'm sure you see that as well. So let's talk about the name, right? Off the Beaten Path Financial. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I decided I'm going to become a financial advisor. I'm going to start my own firm. I have no idea what to call it or what I'm going to do. And there was an exercise that I found that was very helpful. And that's kind of where the name came from. So basically, it was like, think about your ideal life, kind of outline some of those things. What are you doing? What is your day like? How does that go? Then it kind of translated that into the business. Who are you working with? How are you helping them? What size kind of business and things?
Mm-hmm.
And going through that process, one of the questions or the prompts was, what's the name of the business? And it just kind of came to me in that moment. And so it was like, Off the Beaten Path Financial. Like, that makes sense. And my whole life, pretty much everything I've done has been not the traditional path. Like, I do sort of take these risks. I do kind of jump, but it's not without preparation, and it's not without fear a lot of times either. but it's the systems that I've developed or the framework or the approach that helps me feel comfortable or confident to take that risk or to make that jump.
Yeah.
And I live off the beaten path. I do off the beaten path things. And so it really felt, after I came up with that, I thought about some alternatives and kind of played around with a few things, but that was the one that made sense. And the longer it's gone on, I feel like everything has just reinforced that decision of, it really encompasses what I'm about, what the firm's about, what we do for our clients, and everything.
So good. And now having done this for a while, let me ask you, what do you see most people are getting wrong about money these days?
I think most people are too passive. They're
So,
and so I mean I kind of mentioned that a little bit before, but beyond that, even when it comes to their investments, like most people these days just set it and forget it, and that's kind of the typical advice. And so
yeah.
again, we do things a little bit differently. We believe in a little more dynamic approach, and that was a catalyst for me going down this path because
Yeah.
I talked to a bunch of financial advisors and I read a lot of stuff and was like, okay, so you're just supposed to hope for the best. Like that's just not how I approach life. Like I'm just not going to sit back and hope that things work out.
Yeah.
And hope's not a strategy. It's a girl's name, as someone told me once. And
True.
yeah, so that's kind of the biggest thing is
Yeah.
not having a plan, hoping that things just work out, not having a strategy, not actively managing your money, your investments, etc. That's probably the biggest thing that I see holding people back.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because now engineering mindset kind of shape how you help clients. What pieces of the engineering mind and the engineering process do you think plays in, if any, maybe not anything, but what does any of that play into how you help people today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think it's helped tremendously. So as an engineer, the main thing you learn is how to solve problems. And so most people wouldn't leave their nice, comfy engineering role and then go into a whole new industry and then just start a new business and then kind of figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like one of the things that I used to tell the engineers that were working for me is there's something called specifications, which is basically like all of the minute details about all of the things that are pertinent for the project. And when it's all said and done, it's like this thick and just a massive amount of paper of all these things you're supposed to know.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows all of that stuff, like regardless of how long you've been doing it, but you're expected to, and you're saying that you do. And so in engineering, there's a level of lack of information or lack of like there's always some uncertainty. And so it's all about kind of mitigating that uncertainty, mitigating the risk, and ultimately, how do you come up with the best solution for that specific scenario? And that's how I approach money. That's how I approach finance and investments. And so I'm very good at figuring things out. I'm very good at solving problems. And I have a logical, systematic sort of way that I think through things. And I think that resonates with a lot of the people I talk to, as well as being able to think about the big picture and then get really into the details. And that's another important skill for engineers of being able to zoom in and out. And I think a lot of people get stuck either in the big picture or the details, and they can't go back and forth. And again, when it comes to money, it's like, okay, we need to think about the big picture. How does your life, your values, the things that you're doing relate to how you're spending, where your money is, how it's invested, these things? Is that setting you up for your long-term objectives? But what does that mean for you today? And what does that mean for this specific account and this specific thing? So being able to zoom in and out, think about those things, and ultimately manage the complexity. And so people have a lot going on, and a lot of advisors will work with people just on their investments or maybe retirement planning. My approach is a little more, it's substantially more comprehensive.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at all these different facets of your overall financial life and pulling that all together into something coherent and simple and clear that someone can actually execute on. So all of that kind of comes together of managing the complexity, bringing parts and pieces in, solving problems, zooming in and out. And that allows me to do all of that to provide to the client a really clear, actionable strategy that's going to help them achieve their goals.
So nice. And that's what people are looking for. I feel like when it comes to money is organization. I know my husband and I, we're kind of old school, right? Like when you said that earlier about set it and forget it, like that was kind of how we were raised. Like just put it there and pretend it doesn't even exist till you get to your 60s and then we can talk about it. You know what I mean? So I totally resonate with that. And you've said some powerful things. Most dreams, I want to quote this. And I'm going to quote this. Most dreams involve money in one way or another, and your finances will dictate how you live your life. What do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, probably the most sort of underlying drive for me has always been freedom.
Yeah.
And I've asked this question in polls or different things of, what does money mean to you, or what is money? And a lot of people, I think, resonate with that term of freedom. And so, how do you have freedom? Well, you have control. You have control of
Mhm.
your time. You have control of your money. And so, money is, again, the tool that allows you to buy back your time. It allows
Yeah.
you to live where you want to live, to do what you want to do. And so, that's why I've chose to study that, pursue that, help people with it, because it's so powerful. And
Yeah.
so I've achieved a lot of the dreams that I ever had. And I'm still fairly young. And it's kind
Yeah.
of crazy sometimes when I step back and think about what that is. And it's primarily because I understand money and I know how to work with
Mhm.
it. I know how to use it. I know how to save it, invest it, etc. And that is amazing. And that's what I want for everyone. That's what I want for my
Yeah.
clients. I want other people to experience that. And I think most people say they have dreams, but they really are just dreams. They're not
Yeah.
goals, they're not tangible, they're not really taking steps forward to achieve that.
Yeah.
And it ultimately comes down to a lot of times your finances, and like,
Yeah.
do you have the money to support that? Do you have the money to unlock these different things that allow you to live the way you want to live?
Yeah. So, Ryan, where can people find you? Like, I know can you share with where people can find you? What's the best way to take, to get in touch with you and to be able to get some answers?
Yeah. Well, I'm very active on social media. So LinkedIn is kind of where I'm most active, but I also post on Instagram and Facebook a little bit as well. Um, I'm Ryan Sullivan PE. I think on LinkedIn it's .pe. I think on Instagram, I don't know. But Ryan Sullivan PE is where you can find me on any of the social media platforms. And
Hmm.
then my website is obpfinancial.com for Off the Beaten Path Financial. I've got a lot of good information on there. I have tons of resources out there between different podcasts or articles or webinars, different things I've done. So lots of free resources you can check out on my website. And then feel free to shoot me an email. I love talking to
Yeah.
people about this stuff. It gets me really excited. And so it's Ryan at obpfinancial.com. And would love to hear from you, see what your questions are, and see if we can maybe help.
So good. Thank you. And I will put everything in the show notes. I just want to make sure people can get to you and ask questions and connect. Is there something on the website that they can fill out like a landing page and get your information, or should they just email you?
Um, Email is probably best. That's
Okay.
probably best. Yeah.
All right. And all that info is on your website. Perfect.
Yep.
I'm sure your social medias as well. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about Off the Beaten Path Financial?
I think the main thing is we do things a little bit different,
Yeah.
as you might have realized through this conversation. So if you're, tired of kind of being where you're at, if you want a little bit different approach, you want someone that, actually cares and listens and gets it and wants to help you achieve whatever those goals are, then it might be worth a conversation. And we've got a system that I developed. We call it the Wealth Blueprint, and that's kind of our proprietary system of how we work with clients. And again, it's a very comprehensive approach that looks at all these different areas of your financial life. And then we have our dynamic investing strategy. And again, that's a little bit unique. No one else is really taking the approach that we do in that way. And we've seen a lot of success with that for our clients. So if that's something you're interested in, then we'd love to talk to you.
Wonderful. So listeners, we'll put everything in the show notes. You can reach out to Ryan. And we've reached that point in our podcast where we do a 60-second DoorDash with our guest. And Ryan, if you're ready, I'm just going to throw some questions at you. Quick answers, first instincts, don't overthink it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's one thing people think they want, but they actually don't? You said this earlier.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was money, but I don't think that's the right answer. Well, maybe it is.
They
They
probably
want,
think they do.
yeah, they want freedom, and I
They
think
want freedom.
it's a means to an end.
I love it. What's life upgrade most people are one decision away from making?
For me, it comes to mind as property, like land and space. That was a big thing for us and some of my clients. So I think that's easier to get than maybe you realize.
Okay. And what's something you believed about success now at 25 that you no longer believe?
I think that, I mean, it's possible for anyone. It really just comes into doing the work. And I think early on, it's easy to think that, like, how do people get there? How do they get all this stuff or get to a certain place in life? And because they wanted it and they made it happen.
What is one habit that quietly builds wealth, but nobody talks about?
I'd probably go back to that vision piece. That's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough.
Okay. And what does freedom actually look like in real life? Not the highlight reel, true freedom.
Freedom for me is being able to walk out of my house and go skiing and, or move my schedule around or take an afternoon off and just be able to take the day and go do the things that I want to do.
Awesome. And people, people looking for something, what's one question people should actually be asking themselves right now about their situation financially, but you don't think they are?
Am I on the right path?
Okay. All questions done. We did it. But I'm curious about that answer. Am I on the right path? I'm sure that's different for everybody. Is that a question or an answer they can come up with on their own, or is it better to get the help?
I mean, you can come up with the answer on your own, but a lot of times you'll probably come up with a better answer, a better plan with some help. And I think a lot of times people think they don't fully see the value of working with a financial advisor. They think they can just do it all themselves. And I was just talking to a guy yesterday that's always managed his own money, and he lost a bunch, kind of post COVID, and he was doing really well, and then he lost a bunch. And like, it's just, a matter of time before people run in that situation when it's not what you do every day. Right. And so there's more opportunities and more strategies and systems and things than people realize. And so they think it's really simple. They think it's really basic, but the reality is they're missing out on a lot. And again, you've got one life. Why not maximize it? Why not optimize it? And we can at least figure out if there's possible. And if you're doing a great job, we'll tell you that.
Facts. I love it. Okay, so let me ask you this. We call it a drawer moment, but really, what is a moment in your life, a moment when you realized something no longer fit and you had to choose differently, aside from just the career path in general?
Well, I was going to say the engineering piece. That was
that's a big one for sure.
Yeah, that was a big theme. Part of it too is, sort of where we live and kind of how we got here. Like, always wanted, land and space and property and the ability to do what we wanted, easily and just, right out the door. And so that was a dream, for a while, and then a realization like we could actually make this happen, and then a plan of how we actually were going to do that, and then the achievement of pulling all that off. Right. So that was a big thing that changed when really talked to a friend who had bought some land and built a house and realized, why can't we do this? Why are we just talking about it? Why aren't we actually figuring out what does that look like? And so again, I think people spend a lot of time talking about or thinking about the things they want, and they don't spend nearly enough time coming up with how to actually achieve it. And that difference is the difference between having it or not.
And having somebody like you in their corner to be able to help them navigate those questions and get to that answer is just so invaluable. And before we wrap, I always ask guests to leave our listeners with a tiny dare. We call it something small but meaningful that they can take action on today. Ryan, what is something that you would recommend for our listeners?
So there's an exercise that I did that I feel like was very powerful and helpful. And I guess I got to give credit. So I believe it was Debbie Millman on Tim Ferriss's podcast, actually. And she talked about writing out a day in your life 10 years from now in, very, very granular detail. Like you wake up, you do this, you do this, you do this, the whole day till you go to bed. And writing it from that perspective of whatever that day is 10 years from now, and just kind of writing what that looks like. And I did that. And I think it's been, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years, something like that now. And I think I've basically have done almost everything that I wrote about in there. There's like one or two things left. And it's pretty crazy, again, how having that vision, being clear about what you want. I've read that thing maybe 4 or 5 times since I wrote it. And so it's not like I have it in front of me and look at it all the time, but just the power of writing that down, the power of knowing, defining it, and kind of having that in the background, it brings those opportunities to you and allows you to more actively pursue them.
That is great advice. I love that. I'm going to do that myself. So write it down. 10 years from now, where do I see myself? And what does a day look like? A day in the life, 10 years. And we'll make sure this is all in the show notes to remind you to do this. Ryan, such a powerful and resilient conversation of huge achievement in your life. And I'm so excited to send listeners your way. I want them to really check it out and have a different conversation about money with you. Thank you so much for being here today. And listeners, if this conversation hits for you, if you've been sitting in a life that looks right but doesn't feel right, this is your reminder. You're allowed to question it, you're allowed to redesign it, and you're allowed to take one step in a different direction. You just got to do it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe and share it with someone who also might be feeling the same way right now. And if you're in a season of transition, like you're trying to figure out what's your next step, you can connect with me at thesockdrawerpodcast.com. You can connect with Ryan at his website, and we'll have it in the show notes. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining our family today. We appreciate having you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Great questions. Love the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks.
Every week we come here and open the drawer. You already know what's inside. You always have. And if this conversation challenged you in a good way, and you think it will help challenge someone else who needs it, send it to them, because that's how we pay it forward together. Subscribe and follow so you never miss what's coming next. And find us at thesockdrawerpodcast.com.